Today is Thursday, December 29th, 2016, and today we have some new sanctions on Russia from Mr. Obama as it relates to the whole cyber attacks during the presidential election that may or may not have swayed the actual election. Nobody knows, which is the whole point I'll get to a little bit later. But first, before we get into it, before we get into exactly what the statement was, before we get into what was said and all the ifs, ands, buts, ins and outs and everything else, what I want to do right now is tee up this video for you. Now, this comes from Fox News. This comes from a guy who's traveling with Obama. I forget his name, but you will see his name once the video shows. And he's talking about the sanctions and what they mean and why they've been done. And then after we get done with that, we'll come back and then I'll read the statement from Mr. Obama, and then we'll talk more about the whole situation in a little bit more detail. So without further ado, go ahead and roll it.
About sanctions against Russia and some of that breaking news, we're going to check in with our Kevin Cork, who's traveling with the president. We're getting some reaction now from the White House about a report that 35 Russian diplomats could be getting kicked out of the United States. Kevin, what can you tell us?
Yeah, it's actually broader than that. And what we wanted to be careful about was trying this idea of removing diplomatic staff from one nation because you have to be careful. Clearly, that could have been a story in and of itself. We've heard about diplomatic harassment of American diplomats abroad, and so that in and of itself was not necessarily declarative. What we can tell you, however, is you're right. This is all part and parcel to a larger issue, also accusing the Russian government of cyber hacking. I'm going to read part of the president's statement, and it reads this way. Today, I have ordered a number of actions in response to the Russian government's aggressive harassment of U.S. officials and cyber operations aimed at the U.S. election. These actions follow repeated private and public warnings that we have issued to the Russian government and are unnecessary and appropriate response to efforts to harm U.S. interests in violation of established international norms of behavior. And it goes on to say, and it's fairly lengthy, and I won't read it all to you, but I can tell you this. It talks at great length about some of the ideas that the Russians, at the very highest level of Russian government, were behind the cyber attacks that impacted the U.S. election in 2016. And as Reuters has been reported, and as our Lucas Tomlinson and others, Matt Dean and our staff have been confirming, that means a number of Russian diplomats will be moving on from American facilities, or facilities based here in America, including one in New York and one in Maryland, we are told, that will be shuttered. We'll keep following this story for you, Heather, as I continue to hear from senior administration officials. I'll pass it along to you. But for now, back to you.
All right, Kevin, do we know what kind of facilities these are? You mentioned ones in New York and Maryland. Are these some of the like weekend camps that they sometimes have, or are these sort of consulate-type buildings?
Yeah, you're right on the money. These annexes are typically not utilized on a daily basis, but they certainly can be. When you talk about camps, in case people have not seen these, or they maybe have driven by and didn't know exactly what they were, often these encampments are for high-level dignitaries who come into town. It's not the same as a consulate per se, but these are major facilities, and it sends a very strong and declarative message to the Russian government that cyber attacks, especially those that impact our infrastructure, in this case the American election, won't be tolerated.
Yeah, and Kevin, I understand that it may be premature to ask this question, but I'll ask you anyway since we do have you. The people who are intended to be kicked out, do we know if they had any involvement with this hacking?
Great question. I've been in constant consultation with senior administration officials at the very highest level. And while they're very cautious not to say that is the case, I can tell you just based on conversations I've had, it is not a surprise if they do feel that way, although I've yet to confirm that.
Okay, so you're able to see that. You see kind of what's going on. You see what he said. Now, this is really crazy. You know, I'm not really surprised that Mr. Obama has done this, because I think that the U.S., or at least Mr. Obama and his campaign, they kind of want to engage in the Cold War. I mean, and what better way to engage in a Cold War than by basically making 30 plus Russian diplomats persona non grata, basically expelling them from the country. And you also shut down a couple of like compounds. But, you know, in the statement which I read, I think they made these places that got shut down seem like they're more important than what they were. I think this is more about his legacy, Mr. Obama, that is, trying to make himself appear to be tough on the big bad Russia, even though they haven't really done anything that I've seen. You know, if there's evidence, which they say they keep saying they're always going to present the evidence, and then they say they don't really want to present it all. But my thing is, if you have the evidence, why not show it? I mean, why not show it? I mean, we getting into this little Cold War here, and you don't want to show the evidence. I think that's kind of fishy. If you have something that you are using to make your moves be, more accepted, then you should tell the American people, because we're going to be the ones that got to pay for it in the end. If there's any kind of, retaliation from Russia, it's going to be us, the American taxpayer, the American individual that must pay. You want to have us involved in like these little pseudo wars for the United States between us and Russia. But where's the evidence of any kind of cyber attacks? And if you're going to talk about cyber attacks, let's not have it be one-sided. Let's talk about the United States as well. Have we impeded upon the Russian government? Have we gone over there to, spy on them? I'm not even saying that what they're saying about Russia is true. And I'm not saying what people have said about the U.S. is true. But if we're going to, point the finger without evidence, then you can't say that it's valid when at the same time people are pointing the finger at us, the United States, without evidence as well. Prove your case, especially if you want the American people to believe it. Now, he says that he's going to release the information, but I always hear that. That's like their tried and true thing at this point. That's their tried and true catchphrase. That's their go-to phrase right there. We'll release it when it's appropriate, and we're not going to release everything. I've heard Obama say before that he won't release everything because it could endanger people. It could reveal how we get our information. They said that if they release it, then people would know how they got it. But my thing is this. Here's a good question. If you release the source of the information, or where the information came from, or what the information is, and that would alert them as to how you got it, then how can you say that just saying that they got the information is not alert enough? You don't think that they know where the potential holes in their security are? I mean, this is not, the so-called JV team that Obama has used before talking about ISIS, right? Even though ISIS is not a JV team, they're very dangerous, but I digress. If there's so much information, if there's so much evidence out there, then release it, because you can't say that the reason why you're not releasing it is because the Russians or whoever else you want to accuse of any kind of crime would find out how you got it. Because if you say that they've done something, then they're already reviewing all of their points, right? Now, I don't know if Russia did it or didn't. I think all of Americans would like to know if they did it. Just provide the information. Just provide something. You can't just keep saying this happened, this happened, this happened. If it did happen, I won't necessarily be surprised, because things happen. Countries, they engage in competition, they engage in war, these little cold wars. But I think there's a lot to be said on both sides of the coin. And I think that Trump being elected, even though I don't agree with everything he says, I agree with a lot of what he said, especially dealing with Russia. Because why not be a friend to a nation so things like this won't happen, or they shouldn't happen? We can try to prevent things like this from happening. If what Obama is saying is true, we could have prevented it by being friendly with our neighbors across the pond, so to speak, with, fellow big countries. I'll say that we could be friends with fellow big countries rather than engaging in these little cold wars. Now, some would say that Trump was trying to engage in a cold war with China, but no, that's not it. It's all about being fair. It's all about negotiating, right? That's what it's all about. You're engaging in the Cold War. That's when you're trying to put troops on people's borders. It's when you're trying to accuse them of doing things that they didn't do. Keep everything above the belt. And if you want to compete with someone, talk about economics, talk about things that really matter, like currency manipulation, trade deals and stuff like that. That's what really matters, in my humble opinion. You're talking about, messing with the election. I think that's kind of small. And then beyond that, I think that if Hillary would have won, there would be no investigation, because whatever the Russians did or didn't do didn't make a difference as it relates to, the Hillary Clinton campaign being able to be successful. If you listen to the SJW, she did win because she got 2 million more of the popular vote. So if the Russians were trying to interfere with the election, how effective was it really? I think more than anything, our electoral system worked the way it was supposed to work. So you couldn't have any kind of outside influence or any kind of mob rule. And it worked in favor of Trump against Hillary, you see, because she got more of the popular vote. Because like I say, if the Russians were so good at what they were doing, or if they were effective at all, then that would have not been so. She would not have got 2 million more of the popular vote. And beyond that, I think it's just people trying to find things to make excuses for. Barack Obama trying to find a reason, Hillary Clinton trying to find a reason as to why she lost. Maybe it's because she went to cold country and said that you're going to lose your jobs. Me being from West Virginia, I know that offended a lot of people. You go out there talking about, Oh, you're gonna put you out of business if you're a coal miner, et cetera, et cetera. That did not fly over well, and there's no surprise that she lost West Virginia, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, all of which are in coal country, right? It's no surprise. Also Kentucky, of course. It's no surprise that she lost those areas. It's really not. You can't blame that on the Russians, really. And beyond that, as I close, what the so-called Russians or whoever leaked the information, like Julian Assange said that he did not get it from Russia. He got it from the inside, from a disgruntled Democrat, which makes more sense because, like I was getting ready to say, talking about the DNC emails, which have been revealed, which I think is the whole crux of this whole situation. The Democrats are trying to say that the Russians hacked them, and that's why the information got out. But you got to look at the actual emails and see what was going on. There was infighting going on with the Democrat Party. That is part of the reason why Hillary Clinton lost. I mean, you had them trying to basically railroad Bernie Sanders, who at one point may have been more popular than Hillary Clinton, at least in the media, at least people that were very vocal. I'm not really sure how well he would have done on a campaign trail, but apparently he was threatening enough for the Democrats to basically collude against him to try and make Hillary be the more attractive figure to secure the nomination for the DNC, presidential candidate. So that is kind of what's going on. You got a lot of weirdos, a lot of individuals, a lot of unholy alliances between people in the Democrat Party and also the mainstream media, people that are married to each other, people that are brother and sister that are in the mainstream media and also in the Democrat Party. A lot of that stuff was going on. And at a certain point, the American people are not dumb. We see things like that and we like, hey, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. What's going on with that? And then you got somebody like Trump's out there pointing it out. Even Bernie Sanders was pointing it out when he was racing against Hillary. So I think that Americans were able to see what was going on in Washington, D.C., and we're able to make our minds up regardless of what people on the outside may or may not have tried to do. So what do you think? Do you think it was the Russians who hacked the Democrat Party? Do you think that there will be evidence that the Obama administration will provide? Now, if that's your assertion, then what makes you think that? Have you seen any evidence? I'm not necessarily an expert over here. I don't have all the information in the world. That's why I ask you for information if you have it. If you're aware of something that I'm not aware of, please let me know in the comments below. If you have any kind of evidence, even if it's circumstantial, any kind of correspondence between individuals that may suggest that the Russians hacked the Democrat Party, that would be great to have. I'm not a one-sided person. If you have that, I'll comment on it. I may even do a video on it. Or do you think that I'm correct here about this being all about Barack Obama's legacy, first of all, and second of all, being about the Democrats trying to make excuses as to why Hillary Clinton lost, rather than taking their loss on the chin like a man or a woman, right? Take that L and go to bed. Stop trying to be out here crying about why you lost, all this, that, and the third, trying to point the finger at everybody else except for you. I resolved some of these so-called think pieces online trying to blame black people for the election going the wrong way. It's like, don't blame us. Don't blame us. I mean, realistically, how you going to blame us? See, that's part of the reason, as I close, that's part of the reason why I'm not a Democrat anymore, because they expect us to be lockstep, stomp down, attack dog for the Democrat Party. When you get 80 to 90% of the black vote, what more do you want? What more do you want? A lot of us didn't come out and vote, but you got us in these Democrat cities, which, is easy to collect a felony. But I ain't gonna talk about that, and I digress. I'm gonna leave it at that. I just wanted to bring that up as an aside. But whatever your comments are, whatever your information is about this election, whatever you had to say, let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.